about your background, who you are, where you come from, how you've ended up, being in the career that you are in, and then over and above that, doing the freedom counselling sessions privately.
My background is I'm Zambian. I migrated to Australia when I was 1. So we migrated in the 80s when there were no Black people here at all.
Other than the Indigenous mob.
Other than the Indigenous mob, but in terms of Africans,
yeah,
it was like you barely saw anyone else who was African. So yeah, we migrated here. It was a really, really challenging, tough, rough time for my family, being migrants, trying to reestablish themselves in this new homeland, facing lots of things around racism, but also loving it at the same time, like it just became home. So I don't know anything else other than being here. So I'm an African Australian, and a proud one at that. So I have a background in social work and a really interesting career in terms of my job is pretty much centered around grief, which is really unusual, but really awesome. And it's like a real honor to work with people in the space that I do. And through social work, I kind of got stuck at a point in my career and just felt really led to start doing couples counselling training. And if you know me, you know that I love drama. And if you know couples are all about drama.
Yeah.
So I just love learning about the nuances and the theories behind couples and families and why we do what we do. Yeah. And I just think maybe through life experiences, through like loss and grief that I've had on my own, it's just added on to my work and my passion for couples and family. I work in a hospital setting as well as doing couples counselling. So I work at the Children's Hospital and work with a whole range of families. But the bulk of the families that I see have babies. So I guess that's why I was a good candidate for you, Dawn, in terms of your series.
Yeah.
But yeah, really looking forward to it, and thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And on a personal level, you obviously married yourself, because it'd be a bit strange to talk about things when you are happily single, but you happen to be happily married with 2 lovely children, aren't you?
That's right. So how could I forget? I'm a mum. And I'm so happy to be done up today. I threw out my tracksuit pants. I had a shower. I have makeup on. I've done my hair.
Right. So you're not smelling like baby?
No. No. Not yet, anyways. So yeah, I'm a mum of 2 girls. My youngest is 1. My oldest is 5. And I am happily married most of the time. Yes.
I like that. I should adopt that myself. Well, I suppose my first question will be, when people enter relationships, those initial days you obviously enter into a relationship for most people because there's one level of attraction. There's a hopefulness that, things are going to be amazing. You never quite consider what the relationship is going to face in reality, like some of the turmoil that might come with it. And I suppose now, especially during this season that we're in with COVID and everything that's going on, what has been one of or 2 of the biggest observations you've seen with couples and the challenges that they've been facing in this season?
Look, that's a really good question. And it's a big question and probably something relevant to all of us in this season. And I think, COVID's probably a really good example about how, you spoke about when you first enter a relationship and, in my head, I think like the honeymoon period, it's all good, you have plans, you're both sort of ignorant to what's about to happen for you. And, like life happens. And whatever you are expecting or whatever you have planned or whatever way you thought it was going to be, life happens and just does a big dump on us. And it really throws us all. And I think that anyone or all of us in 2020, no matter what you were thinking for yourself in terms of your career, in terms of your finances, in terms of your family, in terms of your health, in terms of whatever it is, like we are completely thrown. And I think that's probably something in this season, what I'm getting in terms of couples anyways, is them really struggling to navigate this unexpected change and this strong level of uncertainty on their lives, but ultimately which impacts our relationships. And, and what does that look like? For example, like if you're the kind of family where one of you goes off to work or you both go off into the office, if you do have little children, this season is going to look really differently for you if you're both stuck in the house having to work from home and having to try and navigate that. But I think more than anything, I think it shines a light on what your vulnerabilities are.
Yeah, that's good.
So a lot of couples would say, we're really struggling with A, B, and C. But truth of the matter is, you were probably struggling with it before, but it wasn't so much of a thing because you weren't trapped in the house together.
Yeah.
Or do you get what I'm trying to say? Like
the season then shines a spotlight on that more.
Absolutely. And you're trapped. And maybe the things that you might have used to sort of help you through, whether that's kind of not really ever being at home or being able to get out of the house or, pouring yourself into work or whatever that is, you can't do that anymore. And it's just like this build-up of whatever that problem or issue is. So it's a bit of a catch-22 because, yes, it is more intense and it might seem quite unbearable, but I think just from a counsellor's perspective, it's the universe actually saying to you also, like, this is something you need to deal with now.
Yeah.
And you're ready for it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm trying to, as you're speaking, think in my own personal life how, some of those things have showed up. And I know that for me, I'm such a control freak, which I think most people are. They just are in denial, and some of us are a bit more bold about saying it out loud. And so one of the first things I did was obviously go, okay, there's a lot that I can't control, but I can protect my family. And I went full mode into discovering and figuring out what my family needed. But as a result of that, I think two things popped up. One was I'd exhausted myself in the other, and in this instance was obviously family, that I had no time and no space and no will to actually do what the relationship needed. And also I think that 13 years later that things have changed, and what sometimes it feels like such a gradual change that you don't see it happening, and then you wake up one morning and things look quite different. Is that something that you would say that most people perhaps have been feeling, in the sense of trying to spend this season so much caring about the external and not focusing on themselves, and that there has been some consequences that have come out of that?
I think it's kind of like a pressure cooker, and it's not just for, like if you have kids as well, like, or even like your work, like everyone has been completely stirred up. And so I think if you take into consideration whatever your things were before, so let's just say, like, if I use the example of you're at home, you've got your kids, you've got your husband, you're working on your business as well. But there were probably ways that you were able to manage that previously, even though there were definitely still stresses that you would have had in that sort of dynamic. Same thing for me. Whereas now, when we're all in the house and, our kids can't go to the playground, and the people that we would have normally had to care for our kids, there's been a lid placed on that. And you know, like there's now like, so, you know, someone's upstairs working and you're downstairs, you know, trying to do your thing and trying to manage kids at the same time. And every day sort of feels like Groundhog Day. And now I can't see my family and my friends who are my normal, you know, the normal thing that I would use for self-care, you know, like, or having play dates is the sort of thing that I would do to break up my, I don't have those things anymore. They've been taken from me, you know, and I have no choice. And, you know, not only that, but I actually don't know what the future looks like for me.
Yeah.
And that's for me, but, you know, for other people, it could be, you know, like that work, you know, they're now unemployed or you're a business, whatever it is. Yeah. So I think in moments of, I'd call this crisis, we generally have to try and pull on different things, but we tend to not be good at doing that. Okay. Because we often just want to do life as we know it and do what we've always been doing. But the truth is, when you're in a crisis sort of situation, doing what you were doing does not work. Yeah. And you have to be creative and have to come up with different things or different ways of coping. Yeah. And for couples, like, we get on each other's nerves. Yeah. You know, like how I deal with this is very different to how my partner is dealing with this. Like, so that also in itself, yeah.
And how do we then communicate that to each other? Because I suppose the biggest thing that's lacking in that space is the ability to say, one, to recognize in due time that things have changed, to ensure that both of you are in agreement that things have changed, and therefore figure out what does that change mean for each of you. What would you suggest is the best way for couples to actually be able to almost kind of take stock of where they are at and what's going on?
Well, I would say that for any situation which is like a crisis situation, I think that most couples would probably be able to agree on the fact that they are, you know, it's a really tough situation and it's hard and it's challenging. But what we're not necessarily good at is communicating with each other in terms of where we're at in the crisis. Okay. And so I think where we can become really unstuck is we all grieve differently. Yeah. All of us grieve so differently. Yeah. And the irony is that in moments when you really just want closeness, is often, not all the time, not with every family, but that's often when you kind of butt heads the most. Yeah. And it's because you just kind of can't really recognize or appreciate each other in this season of grief. Yeah. And the other person...
Sorry to interrupt you. When you speak about grief, though, you are kind of saying that, you know, grief, of course, is grief of losing someone you love, which we'll get to in a short while. But even in this instance, you are referring to our normality. The loss of our normality ends up in some emotions of grief, you know. So
that's right.
The grief, grieving the loss of having the play dates, grieving the loss of having what was normal to you. That is. Do you think that couples recognize that when they are in that mood, it's actually not a mood? It is a genuine an authentic space that I actually feel this way because I'm grieving the ability to my routine, my ability to wake up and go to a coffee shop and sit down. And do you think they're attuned to knowing?
No. Space? We're not very good at tuning into each other when we're in that space at all. So, you know, and what we probably see more is the manifestation of the grief and how that looks. So whether that's, you know, for some people that, you know, they might be a bit more moody, for other people they withdraw. Yeah. And you're there wondering why your partner, you know, isn't really talking, they're not really engaging, they're not really listening, they don't really seem to be part of, you know, they're not really connecting or firing on the same level. But we are really good at just getting on with it, but we're not really good at stopping and trying to check in with each other. or we don't really even know ourselves in this space, because it's a whole new thing to try and navigate.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, when have you ever been in a pandemic with your partner before?
Yeah.
For most of us, never. It's our first time.
Yeah.
And so we're all just trying to navigate that and what that looks like, and we're all trying to survive, and all trying to make sure our kids are okay, and all trying to get the homeschooling thing done, or trying to look for work, or whatever that is, or trying to survive work.
We go into mode instead of stop for a moment, recognize what's going on, and then from that place figure out how you survive together.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. I suppose then that is even more amplified when a couple goes through a greater grief, like a miscarriage or the loss of a child. I remember for Nick and I, obviously we accredit a lot to our marriage surviving the loss of our child, but one of the things that certainly motivated us was reading a stat that I think has since changed, but at the time, the stat was talking about something like 80% of couples who have lost a child, their marriage ends up in divorce. And you would barely be married at the time, so I think we were 3 years in, and for us that was so shocking and so alarming that we worked our butts off to make sure that we wouldn't end up being a part of that stat. Does that I mean, I suppose I've asked this question away already, but it was quite alarming for me to learn that has been the reality of a lot of couples and a lot of relationships. And I think I want you to elaborate further, because you've already responded to it earlier by saying that people grieve differently and they approach it differently. How much more amplified does that become when it comes to things like losing a child and losing a miscarriage? And I want to do those two things. Maybe we can break it down into two same questions that we respond differently, because I know that I've experienced a miscarriage and what that meant to me. Seemingly, I found out months later that it meant something completely different to my husband. And therefore how we related to that information and that knowledge, and how even now then in the present, I speak about, I've had 4 pregnancies. And I talk about, people ask me, I talk about I've had 4 pregnancies and I've given birth to 3 babies, and 2 of whom are still living. And Nick completely tells a different, or his narrative is presented very differently in the way that I do. So I just, back to the question then itself is how much more amplified and how much more challenges English judge, how much more of a challenge is it then for couples when they're having to deal with something that cuts that deep, and all the more during the COVID season?
Oof, that's a big question. I think the example of you and Nick is a really good one, and also really important for people to know if that's their situation, because I guess the loss of losing a child is huge. And I don't think that couples really have enough time to really let that cement in terms of how big that is. And just like what you said, Dawn, it's going to be so different for each person in the partnership in terms of what that would look like. But I think the big thing is, I would probably say the same thing to a couple who has had a miscarriage, to a couple who has had either had a stillbirth or had a baby that has been born and has later passed. I would say exactly the same thing, because I think that the heart of every couple would be the same.
Yeah.
And it hurts, and it's a massive loss, and it is earth-shattering, it's awful. But ultimately what we all want is connection, even in our pain.
That's great.
And what I think I kind of touched on it, but what often can happen, and this is not every couple, so if this is not you, bless you, but I think for a lot of people, it's, you know, you do actually want to feel close, or you kind of want to grieve together, or you want to feel heard, and you want to feel like you're connecting even in that awful space of just grieving. And we don't do this well, and it's because we've never really been taught how to do it. And so I think, like, if I were to just give a few pointers, like what I would say is, firstly, like I said before, we all grieve differently. So whether it's your husband, whether it's your, you know, boyfriend, whatever, you are not with you. So what that means is, when you are hurting, your partner will hurt differently, and it will look different to you. And so sometimes we can get stuck in kind of comparing. I know that I've done it before. Like, I've had a miscarriage, as you know, before. And often I would be looking then at my husband being like, he has not done anything. He hasn't even cried. You know, he hasn't done this. He's now gone back to work. He's fine. He's this, that, and the other. You know, like, you're busy looking at what the other one's doing. And what I didn't realize is that actually he was hurting too. It just looked differently. Very different, because that's just not who he is. Perfect example of it is if you're in your car and the petrol light goes on, how you respond and how Nick responds is going to be very different.
Nick will have that light on till like 5-2. 5-2. And I'm just like, why you need that heart attack in your life? Whereas me, the light comes on next petrol station, fill the car up. Right?
I'm the same where I'm like panic, full panic, verbal panic. Yeah. Everyone in the car knows the petrol light is on. Oh my gosh. Can you start Googling where we go? Like, it's quite out there.
There's a reserve tank is the words I hear. There's a reserve tank. We could still go for another 20 kilometers. I'm like, yeah, but you don't know when it's going to end, right?
So, like, grief is literally the same. It's literally the same kind of concept, like, in terms of how you respond to the petrol light going on, like when you're on empty. And so, like, you know, some people are more intuitive in their grief style. So that means that they're more likely to reach out, you know, and generally speaking, it's often more of a female way of grieving, where, you know, you're ringing up your girlfriends, or you're now Googling, looking for support groups, or, you know, you're trying to talk your way through it at some stage. Whereas some people, they withdraw, and it seems like they're okay, but they're actually really not. And their way is just to keep going, you know, like, so they might kind of throw themselves into things. So it might kind of look like they're not grieving, or, you know, they're not hurting, but truly they are. That's just their style, and that's the way they do it. Whereas other people, which is also more of a man's style, is they're more kind of instrumental in their grief, which means they are like trying to fix things, you know, they're more like doers, and they do grief in doing. So they're the ones who, you know, if it's like, you know, they're the ones who are like, okay, I'm going to ring up the funeral home. I found this, I found that, and now I've done that. And that's also a way of grieving too, but it's just different. But to be truthful, how you grieve isn't what's so important, but the importance is more trying to understand each other and be heard by the other in the process. Right. Does that make sense?
Awesome. Is there then a wrong or a right way of grieving? Like, how do you know that you know, your partner or even yourself, you are actually not doing the work, you know? So I understand that the work itself is going to look different, and the work itself is going to look similar to, you know, your personality traits and things like that. How do you know if you are doing the work, or if your partner is doing the work? And if the response is you're not doing the work, or your partner is not, what's the best approach to go about saying, hey love, I think you can choose how you do the work, but I feel at this point you actually are not doing what's in your best interest so far as your grief is concerned?
So to answer your question, I would say you need to stay in your grief lane.
Whoa.
So, yeah. So what that looks like is, you know, if your partner grieves like that, that is actually okay. It might seem unsettling or uncomfortable to you, but it only seems unsettling and uncomfortable to you because you don't understand it. And you don't feel like you're in the, you're not there with them. So it's quite foreign. So you don't really feel like they're doing their work. They are doing their work. They're just doing it differently to you. So I guess the whole thing is, it is actually possible to grieve together.
Yeah.
And what that looks like, Dawn, is just having a space where, I'll tell you a few things. Firstly, having a space where you can actually understand each other. So what that might look like is, you've gone back to work and you've gone in full swing or doing stuff around the house or whatever, but I understand that this is your process and that's okay. And you're hurting too, like me. But for me, you're doing that, but for me, I can't get out of bed.
Yeah.
I can't do stuff in my house. I can't, you know what I mean? Like, I feel so broken.
Uber Eats when I'm grieving.
Uber Eats,
I'm just
McDonald's,
Hawaii, KFC, and don't bother cleaning up. Kleenex, they're all just
you just can't do anything, and that's like also okay too. So how do we, essentially it's kind of like merging the two worlds.
Okay.
And so to merge those two worlds and to grieve together and not separately, because often in grief we feel so alone sometimes, and we can feel so isolated, and we can feel so much by ourselves. And so there's a few things that I would say to, or what I do say to couples, or I'd say to friends, is firstly, grief looks different, like I've said, but also it changes us. Like, there is no more humbling experience than grief. Yeah. Like, you were doing life, you were doing your own thing, you were on your own journey. If it's, around losing a child, when you, whether it was planned or unplanned, your expectation was you were going to have a baby, and the expectation was going to be, that you were going to have sleepless nights, or the expectation was that, like, it was going to be an awful birthing experience, because that's what we always hear, like these kind of stories. Yeah. But you sign up for a dream, and to be honest, like, it ends up sort of in some ways being a nightmare, or you sign up for the wrong sort of dream. Yeah. And when it happens to you, whether it's a miscarriage, whether you give birth to a stillborn baby, whether you lose a baby or lose a child, even, like older than an infant child, you will never be the same.
Yeah.
Ever be the same. And we have to understand that who you married or who you're with now versus this person now that we've had this loss is different. Yep. It's a different person. Yeah. It's not the same person. And when you're in that grief bubble, it's even more a different person. Yeah. So like, if you're tend to be the person that holds the household together, if you've experienced like that sort of loss, you might not be that person anymore. Yeah. Do you get, or if you're kind of the provider, or you're sort of the one that emotionally holds everyone together, you're not going to be that, you're not that person anymore. So it's kind of about, how do we now navigate this new change? And this is where a lot of, when you were talking about the stats with couples, this is what it's all about, because you're now in a relationship with someone that you don't understand anymore. Yeah. And how long, because when you're in it, like, we've been in this situation, I know that I have, when you're in it, you're kind of like, it's kind of been like, a few weeks now, they haven't changed. Yeah. Like, when are they going to come out of it? Like, when are they going to, and you're hoping and waiting for it. And, like, as we all know, grief is not about time. So firstly, it's recognizing that we are not the same anymore. So now, who are we? and what's that going to look like? The second thing that just on a practical level that I would say to couples is having what we call like a grief check-in.
Okay.
Because,
and what's a grief
check-in? You know, so I was sort of talking about it before in terms of feeling really isolated and really alone and, you know, often feeling quite disconnected. A grief check-in is on a practical level, once a week. It's up to you how many times you want to do it a week. We are having a grief check-in. So you make a
couple.
Hey?
We're having a check-in with each other as a couple.
We're having a check-in with each other as a couple. So we are going to make a time. So it's going to be Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock for 30 minutes. We're going to have a grief check-in with each other. And it's not just like, it's not a like just a casual, general, how are you? It's specific to how are you doing right now in this season? And so I'm big on rules. So I would say for my couples, in your check-in, let your partner talk freely. Don't butt in. No one needs to know your opinion. Just let your partner talk, like let it be like a safe space for your partner to just talk about whatever it is that's kind of, you know, whatever's on their heart. So that might look like, you know, it might be like, hey, so on Tuesday I managed to get out of bed and I went to the shops for the first time. Or it could be, you know, I was watching TV and I saw this baby, or I saw this advert about nappies and it just broke me and I started crying. Or do you know what I mean? Like, or it could be, you know, like, so it's just space to see where you are both at in your grief. So it has to be intentional, it has to be planned, and it has to be safe.
That's good.
And I think it does wonders because we often assume we know our partners, but we're often not very curious about actually what they're going through. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I like that.
So this takes out the assumption out of it. This is actually, I see you and I hear you and I have a safe space for you. And if you want to reach out, or maybe you don't want to talk about anything at all, maybe you want to make it like have a laugh, but it's just that space of this is us, this is what we're going through together.
I like that. Now on external people, because I'm hoping, of course, we're having people who are, you know, in a relationship themselves, so that they are finding this quite useful. But there might be, you know, people who are support structure for their friends and their family. And I know that for me, in all the different seasons, there's obviously been a good batch and a weird batch, and then the I don't want to ever see you again batch when it came to grieving and managing what I was going through. The other day, just a few days ago, Chrissy, John Legend's wife, put those very intimate photos of, you know, them losing their baby. And for the most part, I don't read comments because they will cause me to throw my phone at the wall, and I really am not that rich, so I can't afford replacing every day. So I try to not read comments at all. But I did it, and I was so upset.
You read the comments?
Yeah, stupid.
Dawn.
I know, shock horror. And I was so upset by the things that people were saying in the comments section, like, oh, it's okay, at least you still have, you know, your other two babies. You have to just try to pull yourself together for the sake of your other babies, you know. Hang on, I've lost you for a second. You still there? Oh,
sorry. I'm here. Sorry.
Yeah, so they had things like, you know, pull yourself together. You still have, you know, your two other kids that need you. They need their mum. You're rich. You can afford to, like, do you know what I mean? And so it just, I suppose it just kind of reminded me of how clueless our intimate community, and not that social media is intimate, but it reminded me of how clueless how our immediate community is. So even and immediate community that includes our immediate family, external family members, your aunties, your in-laws, and whatever else not. And I know that sometimes people say these things with every intention. One of the things that I got the most was, "Oh, you're still young, you can have more babies," which for me just kind of invalidated my emotions and what I was going through. And the second one was it made Zizi's life meaningless because she was just something worth kind of chucking over there and then see ahead with the next baby. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And so you've been really helpful in giving practical tools for couples themselves. Let's now just start to talk about some of these horrific experiences that we end up going through at the hands of our loved ones and our community. And I want to believe that not out of malice.
Yeah.
Because and it's weird for me because one of the people who said to me that you can just have another one had a baby pass on them. So it was just like, you should, Jesus, the rapture, you should totally understand what this is. And saying that to me, how do you think you've been helpful? So without us having to buy a shotgun and kill everyone who says something stupid to us while we are trying to handle and grieve and and go through what we are going through, and Bible bashes with all the verses from the Bible because somehow this verse in this moment is going to help, instead of sending a 12 crate of wine, because that's actually how can our immediate community be a bit more supportive and helpful in the seasons of grief for couple, not taking sides when relationships are starting to stagger? I don't know. I'm just trying to find really practical ways that then beyond it just being about us, that our community can step up and help us.
So I think that's such a big point, because I think anyone who's experienced any kind of loss can relate to that, where people have just said things that are really unhelpful and hurtful and quite minimizing of your pain. But I think, just for me anyways, I would say for you, so if you're going through loss, the first thing I would say to you is I saw this really cool thing on Instagram. I want to repost it on my Instagram page. And it said, you can mute people in real life. It's called boundaries.
That's good.
I love that.
That's good.
I love that, because, sometimes we just feel so overwhelmed or overrun by the people in our lives, and you know that they mean well, but they just say these things, and we all know there's always usually that one family member as well that you're like,
don't name them, everybody, don't post comments,
don't name them, but there's always that one, or a friend, or I think it's actually okay to be like, you know what,
not today,
I don't have energy for that. So I'm not going to pick up your phone calls, or we're just going to have a little bit of space at the moment. I'm going to unfollow you for a bit, or I'm going to log off social media, whatever that looks like for you. But you are allowed to do that because you are in a process and a journey of healing. You do not need any extra negativity or energy that's just going to bring you already down.
Yeah.
There's no need to be nice or, be accepting of, just for your mental health, your spiritual health, your well-being is important. So you just need to do whatever you need to do to be okay. That's the first thing. Second thing, for other people, I find, so I've had it both ways. I've had similar experience to you in terms of people saying things that have really gotten under my skin. So I can think about that when my dad died, or I can think about that when I had my own miscarriage. But I also found the opposite in terms of, because people don't know what to say because it's so uncomfortable and awkward, sometimes they just don't say or do anything at all. And I'm just going to speak for myself and say that hurt more than saying something awkwardly.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And so I just think with loss, you honor someone by acknowledging their pain.
Yeah.
And yes, how the heck do you say that in the right way? To be honest, there is really no right way.
Yeah.
There are no words that can ever replace someone's loss. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think sometimes people have this thing in their head about, if I could just deliver it in the most beautiful way. Look, most of us are not like TD Jakes or Oprah, so we're not going to have that special gifting or whatever. But I think anyone who has been in loss, we all remember the people that reached out to us. We always remember the people that, do you know what I mean? Like, they acknowledged our grief, even in their awkwardness. You'll always acknowledge the people that come and try and support you or help you in any way. And this is just a personal thing for me. This is a gripe that I have. So shame on you, Dawn, for raising it.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you my one gripe.
Yeah.
When people message me and say, let us know what we can do.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I'm going through a hard time. You're a grown-ass woman or man.
Yeah.
You can send flowers, you can send a card, you can send food, you can, I don't know, send a funny thing. You could just send a message of encouragement. When I'm down in the dumps, I do not want to have to be thinking about what I need to do so that you can try and help me. Is anyone else?
How can I help you help me?
Yes. Like, if I was sick, like, don't. Is that just me? Maybe it's just me, but
No, it's actually really good, because I'm thinking of some of the moments, because I think people are. I'm going to defend the people now, because there's been moments when I've been the people. I think the people are. I completely agree with you. I've never thought about it that way. I know that when I've received those text messages, I've just ignored them and then just gone, whatever. But I know that also that I've appreciated people who've done stuff, even the silliest of things, that's for more often than not, that's always brought a smile to my face, from the simplest things to the most elaborate, extravagant gifts that I've received. That's kind of, people know my love language is gifts, everybody. That's always like kind of made me smile. But I think that it is an awkward space where people are thinking, I'm just giving you space, like, you probably have a lot going on. You're having a lot of people. It's like, for me, if someone loses a person of significance to them, I try not to call, because I know that when people were calling me, it was just like, I should just record myself and then just press the player, because it's the same thing. Now I have to tell you what happened and da-da-da-da-da. So I didn't do that. So I think that sometimes maybe people are coming from the space of thinking, we're going to give you some room to breathe, and when you have a moment to exhale and you look around and you figure out what it is that you actually need, when the dust settles, we are here to do that. Now that everybody, the mob has gone, we are going to show up. Now, I don't know how many people actually mean that legitimately, or it's just become the new thing to kind of say. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it is from a really good place, but just personally for me, when I'm experiencing that is the one thing I'm like, well, what do you want me to say now? Can you please, I just find it really frustrating. But like, at the same time, I think there isn't a right thing to say. And like, look, I've kind of contradicted myself, because I'm like, there isn't a right thing to say, but when you say this, but I do think that just loving on people in your, whatever your weight will be a real blessing to people. And I think you can think of what that might look like. So for example, you and I are very different. Like, Dawn will bring food to your house, and she'll, that's her, one of her love languages, and she'll just bless you in that kind of way. That's kind of her thing. That is not me.
Yeah, no one's about to receive food from me.
Yes, no, Dawn is annoyingly so good in this space. But for me, like, I will send you a message, or it might even just look like you know, if you're checking and sending them messages, like what people, if you haven't experienced loss, what you don't understand is it can be long. And I think it becomes real, not just in the days or week following like a death, if it's a death of, you know, if that's a loss, but it's like months and years afterwards. And so I think people tend to get a lot of support and love in the early stages, but then, you know, everyone moves on with their life, and that's okay. But I just think if you have friends who have lost someone, you need to like think the long term and just be available in terms of let them be able to just open, if they feel comfortable enough, let them be able to speak to you or open up to you if that's what it is, or even just say like, hey, honestly, I don't even really know what to say. It really sucks. I wish I could, but I don't know what the right thing to say or do. Like, just you being, I think the people that are just vulnerable themselves with you in the space tend to be the people you probably more so gravitate towards. I don't know about you, but for me, I appreciate those people.
Yeah, that's true. Will, you know, Will, a friend of ours, he used to, I think I mentioned this in the book, he used to come to the hospital, and I'd be asleep, and I don't know when he's arrived, but when I wake up, Will is just there reading his newspaper, and he'll go, hey, how are you going? And I'm like, yeah, good. And that was it. And then he'll just continue reading his newspaper. And then when he's done, he'd come over, give me a kiss. Okay, good to see you. Bye. And then gone. And then like randomly the next day or the day after. But it, you know, and at the time I always used to think this is quite strange. But when I think about it now, there were hours during the day that were killed, and I wasn't on my own, you know, and I was in the room, and he just had this way of embracing the awkwardness and like having it defined and being something. It was like, yeah, this is weird and awkward, and you here, and this sucks, and I get to leave, and you're going to be here. So in this day, there's 3 hours where you don't have to be by yourself, and you don't and he literally just do his own thing. You know, and if he's brought lunch, he'll bring extra lunch for me, and there's lunch over there, and then back to his newspaper or watch whatever on the telly, and then just get up and go. And I think that you're right, there are a few people who have found that space where they can settle in accepting that awkwardness and be comfortable in that moment. They said, this is hard, this is awkward, but if I think about the other instead of myself, I get to walk away from this. And this is not something that's sitting on my mind. And so if for this moment I have to embrace her or him or them in their moment, then I'll just be in the room and not have to say anything and be all right, well, that, can you believe we've been jabbering for just almost an hour now, and I think we've covered quite a few things. So the last thing I suppose I want to ask you is that people who are in crisis now, so two types of people: the couple who's in a relationship and they recognize that they are literally in crisis, and if things don't change, they may end up being stacked. What would your advice be to them? And then the second bit is to our immediate community who has a person, a loved one, and they can see that these guys or this person is in crisis right now. What can they do in order to be able to provide some level of support? So it's for those two separate groups.
I'd say for group one, if you've tried everything and you know who you are, like, and it's not like, you know, the couple that you are in terms of for everyone else, you know, we all have, like, I think everyone has like a couple persona. There's a couple we are with our friends and our family in front of strangers, and, you know, we're always doing fine, you know, that couple. And then there's the real us, and that's the us who we are when we're at home, or, you know, if you have a child in hospital, you know, like just that real raw you. And I think something that we're not good at, including myself, is knowing when we need help.
Yeah.
So just knowing, like, sometimes it's that you've tried everything you possibly can and it's not working. Or other times it's like, you know, when you're in that crisis situation where you have nothing left.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know that feeling that I'm talking about. And I would say to you, you need to know when you need to ask for help.
Yeah, that's good.
And that doesn't have to be, you know, it doesn't have to be like, we need to go for couples counselling, although I would say if you can, if you have capacity, and I know that if you've got a child in hospital, time is hard in terms of, you know, you're at the hospital all the time or whatever, but it would be, you know, you can either go and see a couples counsellor at the hospital, there's social workers, there's psychologists. You know, if you're a Christian, you can go and see a pastor, maybe you have a friend that you respect. Like, just try and reach out, because often the instinct is, when you're in that mode, to try and like go in, like just kind of hide yourself in the dark. But truthfully, we were never created to experience things on our own. And in every single situation, there is always someone that has either been where you're at. So it could even be like a support group or whatever, but know when to get help.
That's great.
Because even though you might feel like you're living through hell, which you probably are, it doesn't have to look the way it is. Like, it can actually be a different experience, even in that hard journey or even in that hard season. And there are so many people out there that can help you through. It's not necessarily going to feel better, because nothing can ever fix what's going on, you know, if it's for your child. But there are people that can make it, help you through it. So that would be my number one thing for people in it. But for people who are on the outside of it, in the awkward space that we were talking about before, I would say that you just need to shower people, even if you're on the outside, because I think sometimes one of the challenges is when you have either they're good friends or family members going through something, sometimes you can sort of feel, if you're on the outside, you don't want to intrude, you know, that sort of trying to be respectful. It's probably more of a Western way, because we know that the African way is not that way. And if you have no idea what we're talking about, what we mean is Africans like have, it's really nice, but sometimes really overwhelming way of just loving you when you're down and out. So it's not like it's just me and my husband. It is we, the community, are all here for you in this moment. Huh?
Yeah, so people will be asking you, have you gone for help? Why is Nick looking at you like that? What did you do? What's going on? Yeah.
Even when you haven't invited them in. Anyways, I'd say on the flip side, like I'd just say, be available, be vulnerable as well. Like, just try and be vulnerable with your, you know, your friends or whoever it is. I would say be persistent in terms of reaching out. And so that might look like you might not get a message back, or that might look like they ain't got to pick up your phone calls. Yeah. And I think that's actually okay. But you're expressing your love and your support, and you're standing with them in terms of just in your actions, you're sort of showing that you're here. You know, if you're religious or if you have like a faith, it's, you know, praying with them, speaking over them. It's just, I think, being consistent in just loving them. And it's, on the flip side, I'd say it's really awkward and uncomfortable and hard being on the outside, knowing that people that you love are hurting. Hard when you can't fix it, and it's hard when you can't be there the way that you would want to, but you can actually show them and be there. Even in, like, we can still love on people amazingly, even in the background. And so I'd say, how can you do that for your friend or your family member? Like, what could that look like? If you could think about it creatively, like, what could you do? And you might not get it right, but this is not about getting it right. It's about just being there. And being there is, you know, like, it's not going to look as pretty in your head as what you think it might, but just, I think hopefully if this season has taught us anything, there's so much power and importance in community. Heaps. So much power in that. And reaching out to people is so important. And, you know, like, it's really important for people going through stuff to know that they are not alone and we are standing with you. And if you're not the sort of person that's good at, like, you know, verbally saying it, send them a text message, leave them a voicemail, like, whatever it is that you think that you can do. You need to do that. You just so happen to be friends with someone in this season. Why is that? All the times you could be friends. Why do you now have this particular friend who's going through this awful season? The universe is actually saying something to you in this moment. Like, you know, you need to just figure out what that is.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's beautiful. I love that you asked me. No, that's beautiful. Thank you so much. Now, if someone wants to reach out to you and kind of get connected to you, sit down with you. If they're in Melbourne, they're obviously going to sit down this way. But kind of start just getting that help directly from you. How can people get access to you?
How do you get access to me? So you can check me out on Instagram. I've just started Facebook, by the way. So check me out on Facebook, Freedom Couples Counselling, or go onto my website. If you have questions, if this is a season that you're in terms of pregnancy loss, in terms of having a stillborn, in terms of having lost a child, this is literally what I do most of my days, to be honest. So even if it's just a question, message me or call me up and I'm happy to answer questions. If you need couples counselling, go and get help. There is help out there for you. I'd be more than happy to do it. But, you know, even if you have questions regarding your area, please just like go and check out my stuff or get help. Or if you like, because I just think, can I just say this lastly? I find that the hardest thing about finding a counsellor is the freaking process about how to find the counsellor. Yeah. It is the most frustrating thing in the world. I feel like this personally myself, when I've had to go and find someone, I'm like, the process, yes, the process is more of a turn off than actually doing it. Yeah. So if you have questions
about how to go about it, that's great. That's beautiful. Well, thank you. This has been absolutely amazing. I'm sure someone will find it useful and help.
I hope so.
No, I'm sure of it. I think we touched on beautiful subjects, and, you know, like, grief and relationships are things that we have to navigate through every day and in every season. And I'm sure that there's some really awesome practical tools that we've given couples and families. So thank you for this again, and have a wonderful